This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Hello there and welcome to Global Business Africa. We'll be giving you insight into Africa's business and financial markets. I'm Uche Okoronkwo coming to you from Kenya's capital, Nairobi. Let's start with a look at the markets. Now, emerging market stocks neared a record high today as hopes of economic recovery and loose monetary policy did help to lift sentiment. We saw MSCI's index of emerging market stocks rising 1.4% to a 13-year peak. It traded a few points shy of a record high. Now, across Africa, Nigeria's main stock index climbed over 1%, driven by major gains in oil firms today, as of course we saw oil prices hitting 11-month highs. Topping the gainers list were oil firms Seplat and Total, both climbed 10% on the day. Okomu Oil and BOC Gas followed closely behind. Meanwhile, South up for a fifth day, we saw mining stocks had a strong showing, benefiting from hopes for U.S. economic stimulus. Now, the mining index advanced for a fifth day, adding a further 0.3% to Thursday's record high. Energy firm Sasol was prominent amongst those gainers. It climbed 2.7% on the day as, of course, oil prices climbed. Now, also coming up on today's show. Output for Kenya's private sector shows marginal growth in December. The U.S. loses jobs for the first time since April as the pandemic hits its economy. And the 7-year-old proves that you're never too young to dream as he invests in his future. Well, let's start off today's show here in Kenya. Business conditions in the country's private sector economy improved only modestly in the past month. That is according to Stanbic Bank Kenya's Purchasing Managers Index for the period ending December 31st. Now, the PMI revealed that output rose at the slowest rate in 6 months, supported by higher employment, but rising input costs, partly caused by supply chains, as well as some input shortages, did result in a slowdown in the growth in output. New order growth quickened slightly, but business confidence fell to a new record low. Now, authors of the report also say the modest month-on-month improvement in the Stanbic PMI does indicate that the pace of the pandemic-era recovery is slowing down. Well, let's get more details on that report. We're joined by Kuria Kamau. He is a fixed income and currency strategist at Stanbic Bank. Great to have you with us today on the show, Mr. Kamau. Now, let's start off with why Kenya is seeing only modest improvements in business conditions, and that's despite the gradual easing of COVID-19 containment measures, which we've seen, and of course, the relative return to business as usual in the past few months. What's your take on the reasons behind this?
Good evening and thank you for having me. So even before I go on and answer that question, I'll just highlight two things about the PMI that will provide a bit of clarity on how it works. So the first thing is any score above 50 points towards an expansion, and any score below 50 points towards contraction. And the second thing is it's a month-on-month comparator. So the December score that you saw signifies economic activity in the month of December vis-a-vis the month of November. And the November score gives you an indication of business activity in the month of November vis-a-vis the month of October, and so on. So with that, I'll just go ahead and answer your question. So as you've correctly pointed out, we've seen a relaxation of COVID-19 measures, and that results in an improvement in business activity. But something else I'll just add on to that is the magnitude of the improvement. If we see a significant reduction in public health restrictions, we also see that translating a significant improvement in business activity. And if you go back to the month of October, where we saw the highest score on record, you'll note that at the end of September, we saw changes with regards to public health restrictions. The first one was the ban of the sale of alcohol at eateries was lifted. The second one was the fact that nightclubs and bars were now allowed to reopen. And the third one was the start of curfew was shifted from 9 p.m. all the way to 11 p.m. And as a result, a result of those changes, we saw the score in the month of October increase all the way to 52. So if you kind of take a step back and look at it over the course, September the score was 56. In the month of October the score was 59, which is much higher. And then in the scores in November and October, I saw 51. So in essence, it's a curve that seems to be flattening. The significant improvements we saw have already been absorbed by the market, and we're seeing economic activity picking up. And then towards the end, we're seeing that begin to diminish. It's just a law of diminishing returns. Right.
Well, let's delve further into those survey findings. Give us a sense to what extent this pandemic is still hampering a rebound in business, even though we're seeing it sort of stabilize now. How much is this pandemic hampering that rebound in business conditions? And are there any other elements not tied to COVID-19 which could be influencing this reading as well?
Okay, so good question. And two things I'll just highlight with regards to COVID-19. So if you look at the outlook, the 12-month outlook, it's becoming more bearish. And part of that is because of we're seeing increased lockdowns in the West. So that's the US and Europe. And those are large export markets for the country. And the second thing is with regards to some of our goods come from some of these countries. So our import costs, we're seeing some problems with regards to supply chain. So with those lockdowns, we're seeing importers struggling to bring in goods as a result. So those are the two impacts. It affects both exports in terms of supplying to external markets, and also imports. It also affects imports with regards to things coming in, and also what the business community sees happening in other countries kind of translates into what they expect. They expect that there are more lockdowns and an increase in cases across the world, and they think something that similar things could happen here. With regards to your second question over other factors, one thing that we noted is the surveyed firms were talking about a rise in input costs. So I mentioned the supply chain problems, but also locally we've been seeing shortages of a few goods, and we're also seeing prices of some commodities beginning to rise. So you'll probably note over the past 2 months, inflation has averaged around 5.5% compared to the October figure of 4.8%. So we're seeing inflation begin to rise, and from what the surveyed firms are telling us, we're also seeing an increase in inputs. And the problem with that is that as much as your inputs are going up, it's very difficult for you to pass them on in the current environment with people struggling with high inflation, and also some people being out of jobs or having lower incomes.
Well, give me a sense of your outlook. Do you expect to see a continued drop in the PMI going forward? Are we going to see that curve remaining flat or stable, as you put it? What are your expectations?
So it's a good question. So the month of January will be a very difficult month to kind of estimate. So the one thing about January is that schools have reopened. So as I mentioned, as we've discussed earlier, is that when you see a relaxation of public health restrictions or normalcy in the economy beginning to come through, we see that translating in improvement in the PMI. So the month of January, there are two things I think to highlight. The first one is that schools have reopened, and you can imagine the whole value chain that supports schools. So that's transport, that's retail with parents doing shopping with regards to uniforms, books and those kind of things. There's also transport. We who live in Nairobi have been feeling the traffic jam that has now started with kids being back in school. Financial services as well, with parents paying school fees. So those things point towards a stronger number in the month of January. However, which brings me to the second point, we're seeing we saw an increase in taxes. We saw the corporate tax rate revert to 30% from 25%. We saw VAT revert to 16% from 14%, and that could dampen some of the economic activity to expect. So month of January could be difficult, but then if you look farther out, I think the biggest jump, the next big jump that we'll see with regards to the PMI will probably come when the curfew is removed. That's the last remaining big public health restriction, and as soon as that's released, you can imagine bars, restaurants, alcohol manufacturers, and all that are used to support that could see a significant improvement when the curfew is released. So in the short term, January could be difficult to kind of gauge, but then beyond that, we see that month on month continue to improve. with expectation that once the curfew is removed, we could see a fairly large jump.
Quite
Thanks.
a positive outlook. Well, many thanks for your insights, Korea. Of course, that's Korea Kamau. He is a fixed income and currency strategist at Stanbic Bank Kenya. Well, let's move on now to South Africa, where economists have further revised the country's already grim 2021 growth forecast. This comes after the renewed lockdown rules, which were imposed between Christmas and New Year in order to help contain a second wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. Here's Angelo Coppola with the details.
Some economists are suggesting that a first quarter...
If you look at this year, because of the low base effects that we saw in 2020, expectations range from anywhere between 2% to about 5%. Our own forecast at Alexander Forbes about 8% for the whole year of 2021. But even that forecast is really subject to risks.
One sector that understands risk is the mining sector. It remains a key pillar in the country's recovery, and operational planning is a critical aspect of its success.
I think from a cost perspective, in terms of the testing and all the additional protocols we've got to put in place, we've made provision in our budgets for this year. From a cost perspective, I think we've anticipated in December that this wave was coming, so we had recruited some additional key skills during the course of last year. We've extended their contracts, to try and fill key vacancies.
There are other risks like public healthcare management and corporate and human counterparty risk, but they're overshadowed by the massive economic risk.
Jobs will remain scarce. No companies are going to be hiring new individuals without knowing how far the economy incomes are going to be impacted, and with incomes being impacted, it means household consumption will also remain quite muted as long as individuals don't feel safe to go out and spend.
While the government can't be questioned about the social support safety net for individuals, economists are questioning how much support the government has provided to the business sector, especially the country's economic engine room, small and medium enterprises.
Roughly between 16 billion to 20 billion of that 200 billion has been disbursed to a small medium enterprise, which means a large majority of those funds are still available, in part also reflecting the credit risk appetite of commercial banks, which are the implementing agents of this instrument.
Just as everyone is expecting the economy to get back on track again, at least to pre-2020 levels, this latest lockdown is going to mean that we're going to see some more contraction. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Meanwhile, Nigeria has maintained its lead as the biggest economy in Africa in terms of the size of the country's GDP. That is, according to the International Monetary Fund in its recent World Economic Outlook report. Now, Africa's leading economy slumped to a contraction in the third quarter of 2020, but is still optimistic of a quick rebound this year. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam reports.
The IMF ranking is based on nominal GDPs of countries' estimates from financial institutions. They're calculated at market or government-approved exchange rates. Nigeria earned the #1 spot in Africa and 26th worldwide with its GDP of about $443 million. Though it puts the West African nation at a vantage position, experts say it's a subpar feat.
Investors across the globe will consider countries where they want to pool their monies. So when we talk about the strength of a country, they are not just going to consider the population. They also want to consider the size of the economy. The larger the size, it is expected that the economy will attract more investment for the country. Nigeria should attract investment in the coming period, and I think in 2020 we should have experienced that, but for COVID.
If we didn't perform well, we're supposed to be the 20th. And if we had done a quarter of the things that were embodied in the Vision 2020 document, I bet you we will have been between the 10th and 15th biggest economy in the world. For instance, we will have very much improved our infrastructure. We will have made ourselves very, very competitive trade-wise in terms of production of goods and services, that we will have positioned ourselves in a very good area to compete now that we have the African Free Trade Continental Area.
Nigeria's GDP contracted by -3.62% in the third quarter of 2020. The recession's been fueled by a raft of issues, including fall in oil prices, trade imbalance, and economic disruptions caused by COVID-19.
All we need to do right now is to reorder our priorities. The music has changed, so we can't continue dancing to the old step. One is that we are not making enough revenue. Two is that the little we have is not properly managed. Secondly, we need to block loopholes.
In the short term, government needs to support small businesses so that pressure that we have on prices will significantly reduce. Number two, what government should do as a matter of medium term is to partner with private sector. With public-private partnership, government can conserve revenue. But the third and the most important, which is the long term, which I think government should start to lay foundation for today, is contained on this of doing business, is also contained in National Economic Development Plan.
It's not yet a huru for Africa's largest economy. More than 40% of the country's population is still poor. The IMF advises Nigeria to implement transformative domestic reforms to promote resilience to economic shocks. That includes revenue mobilization, digitalization, and fostering transparency in governance. A move that could see Nigeria taking a leading position beyond nominal GDP. Kelechi Emekalam, CGTN Abuja, Nigeria.
And now a look at our corporate headlines today. Tesla chief Elon Musk has surpassed Amazon founder Jeff Bezos to become the world's richest man. Including Thursday's gains in Tesla shares, Musk has a net worth of more than $188.5 billion. That's about $1.5 billion more than Bezos. Now, Musk's personal wealth has been boosted by last year's more than 8-fold surge in the shares of Tesla, which became the world's most valuable car maker. Meanwhile, Boeing company is expected to pay more than $2.5 billion in fines and compensation. This comes after it struck a settlement deal with the U.S. Department of Justice over 2 plane crashes that killed a total of 346 people and, of course, led to the grounding of its 737 MAX fleet. Now, the deal means Boeing will avoid prosecution and includes a fine of $243.6 million. Compensation to airlines will be $1.77 billion, and a crash victim fund will get about $500 million. And Credit Suisse Group AG says it expects to post a fourth quarter loss after setting aside $850 million for legal cases, which are related to the legal dispute over property debt in the U.S. Now, the bank had already set aside $300 million in connection to a decade-long dispute with bond insurer MBIA. The company sued Credit Suisse in 2009 over hundreds of millions of dollars it paid out to compensate investors after thousands of mortgages failed. And finally, UK's competition watchdog has launched an investigation into Google's proposals to remove third-party cookies and other functions from its Chrome browser. The Competition and Markets Authority says the investigation will assess whether the proposals could cause advertising spend to become even more concentrated on the ecosystem of Google at the expense of its competitors. And that is a look at our corporate headlines. Well, we are taking a short break now, still to come on the show. The UK imposes a travel ban to several southern African nations. And China and Tanzania bolster their ties during Wang Yi's visit to the East African nation.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. Go ahead,
Beyond beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible and why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sutra Nairobi. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and Global Business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects, just in terms of revenues from taxes alone, $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Welcome back. Now, the United Kingdom will extend a ban on travellers entering England to 11 Southern African nations. The measure aims to prevent the spread of a new COVID-19 variant identified in South Africa. The restriction will take effect on Saturday and remain in place for 2 weeks. The countries affected include Namibia, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Seychelles and Mauritius. Now, entry into England will be banned to those who have travelled from or through any of these countries in the last 10 days. Of course, the UK had previously imposed a temporary entry ban on passengers arriving from South Africa from December 24th. This excluded British nationals, visa holders and permanent residents on condition that they self-isolate for 10 days. Meanwhile, the South African mining sector is seen as a critical industry as it helps to restart its economy after a tough 2020. The country's president has invoked a level 3 lockdown as, of course, it faces a second wave of COVID-19 and the discovery of a new variant. Angelo Coppola has more on that story.
The mining sector also sees a large proportion of its operational and administrative teams take annual leave at this time. The mining sector had to prepare for all eventualities, and this included increased communication with the local community and increased and broader testing for staff.
When the guys came back, our test positive rates peaked at 27% on the second day. 27% of the tests we did reported back positive. The following day, that has dropped down to 22%, and I've just got the results in for yesterday. That's dropped down to 15%. So we are hoping that the enhanced protocols we put in place, that we anticipated this coming around asking better questions and testing guys and driving the behavior has done the right thing.
One of the challenges facing mines is that some of their staff are based in Lesotho, Mozambique and Swaziland.
I would say there might be some delays, but we have to manage the process. And I'm saying might because even from the previous lockdown, there were still about 2,000 employees which had not managed to come through to go to work. So by the time we shut down, they were supposed to have been back, but they had not yet managed to come back.
The employee profile for mines differs. Some are lucky enough to have their staff living in nearby communities.
So we're very pleased at this stage with a figure of 94% people at work. But we also aware of this alarming trend and are treading very carefully to try and ensure that we maintain the behaviours and the habits that we put in place last year.
The Minerals Council is calling on its members to share information and solutions in the fight against the virus.
And we're encouraging companies to really, learn from each other, which starts with then those who find, good practices. They need to share those so that the other companies can also adopt them.
The mining sector might not contribute as much to the growth of the country's GDP that it once did, but its means of operation and the way that it's controlling the spread of the virus is a good lesson to be learned by other sectors. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's move on now. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has concluded his two-day visit to Tanzania. At a joint press conference attended by Tanzanian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Pala Magamba Kabudi, Wang Yi said both sides must cherish their traditional friendship. They also agreed to make full use of their shared vision in the construction of country, political party and armed forces. Now, the strengthened cooperation will also extend to the Belt and Road Initiative, support for Chinese enterprise investments and the export of high-quality Tanzanian products. Meanwhile, the United Nations World Investment Report has considered Tanzania an attractive investment country in Africa since 2014. However, official Tanzanian data shows that investment program and capital started to slump in 2018 compared with the year before. Let's take a look at how China's cooperation with Tanzania can boost the local. Here's Song Yaotin explaining.
With advantages of its geographic position, ports, natural and labor resources, Tanzania is one of Africa's fastest growing economies and has attracted foreign investment for many years. However, investment in 2018 declined 40% year-on-year to only $2.3 billion. The decrease has stalled Tanzania's economic growth and employment, while cooperation with China brings opportunities to change the situation.
And particularly today, as we receive the other Chinese investors from Shandong, we invite them in many areas that we've prioritized, be it in agricultural sector, agro-processing, food processing industries, in manufacturing sector, but also in other service sector, in the tourism sectors. We invite them in the livestock industries, in fisheries industries, and many other industries that we have potential and investment opportunities.
China has become the biggest investor in Tanzania under the framework of the Forum on China-Africa Cooperation and the Belt and Road Initiative. The cooperation of the two economies creates chances to bilateral collaboration, realizing the exchange of Chinese advanced technology and Tanzania's huge market demand.
Not only agricultural products, Shandong has advantages in farming tools and machines, as well as technology for food packaging. Those are exactly what Tanzania needs. So we'll increase investments in sectors like processing food, with Tanzania's abundant resources. Meanwhile, we could use the platform to expand our business in African markets. It's a great opportunity.
So right now, what we can assure you, we know we are in number 144 among the ease of doing of business, but what I can attest to you, in the next 2 years, you will see these numbers will change. Our aim is to be in the top double digits and later on, preferably to be in the single digits.
Tanzania is also attempting to provide a friendlier environment for foreign business by reducing tax and fees and restructuring its supervision department. The country is on its way to industrialization with Chinese technology and investment. Song Yaotian, CGTN.
And the COVID-19 crisis has been a silver lining for Tunisia's inflation rate, which dropped in 2020. And as CGTN's Adnan Shaoshi now explains, that is largely due to a drop in imports. Take a look.
The National Institute of Statistics explained that stability is mainly due to the acceleration in the rate of food price increases by 4.4% against 4.3% in November 2020, as well as health products and services by 7.5% against 7.3% 1 year ago.
The latest figures show that since the beginning of 2020, inflation has been on the downward trend from 5.9% in January 2020 to 5.8% in February. followed by a transitory rebound to 6.3% during the months of health lockdown due to the COVID-19 pandemic, then a gradual ebb to 5.4% from August to October, and to 4.9% in November and December.
The Central Director of Economic Statistics added that core inflation, excluding food and energy, stabilized at 5.9% against 6.1% in October 2020 and 6.3% in September 2020.
Core inflation is stable. We exclude food and energy products because their prices are highly variable. 5.9% is an important indicator of stability. However, it stopped considerably compared to September 2020, when it was around 6.3%.
According to the latest statistics published by the Central Bank of Tunisia, the country's net foreign exchange reserves exceeded $8.6 billion on January 5th. It is equivalent to 161 days of import.
The inflation does not stabilize because of a production ramp-up, but rather due to imports decline. Due to the global coronavirus crisis, Tunisia reduced imports as well as exports. The price of oil is down, and Tunisians don't use foreign exchange as they don't travel. Consequently, foreign exchange reserves hit a new record. This translates into disinflation. However, inflation is still very high in Tunisia.
On annual average, inflation stood at 5.6% in 2020 against 6.7% in 2019 and 7.3% in 2018.
During the first wave of COVID-19, demand for pandemic-related goods as well as food products surged in Tunisia. The prices of some specific goods went up. The demand for medical products is still high, while panic buying for food has stopped in the North African country. Adnan Shawishi, CGTN, Tunis.
Now, Nigeria is witnessing a rapid rise in the adoption of digital currencies and now leads Africa in cryptocurrency usage. More people are now using a cryptocurrency in Africa's biggest economy for their business transactions and investments to help them hedge against the depreciation of the local currency. Now, CGTN's Deji Batmus takes a look and brings us this from Lagos.
When cryptocurrency operator Luno opened shop in the Nigerian commercial city of Lagos back in 2016, interest in digital currency was nowhere close to what it is now, and the government didn't take any interest. But about 5 years down the line, all of that has changed.
The uptake has been pretty impressive. I was discussing with my colleague, sign-ups we see every day is massive. So people, in other words, it means that people are actually interested in this new technology.
It's the same story for another operator, My Top Exchange, which has seen a massive growth in sign-ups in the past 4 years.
The truth of the matter is, people are actually jumping into this cryptocurrency world or trend. Just one reason: they want to make money, they want to make profit, they want to make astronomical profit.
The adoption of cryptocurrency, especially Bitcoin, has grown rapidly in Nigeria in the last 5 years. Data from global peer-to-peer marketplace Paxful shows the country traded 60,215 bitcoins valued at over $566 million within that period. It's the second largest volume worldwide and only behind the US. And it's not only the quest for quick, huge profit that is driving the volumes.
I have customers that they usually make payments to their suppliers using cryptocurrency, because going through the banking system, of course, if you know for a bank, you have a limit to what you can get in terms of foreign currency. So people just use Bitcoin because with Bitcoin, you can get any amount, well, specifically some sort of amount, and then transferring is not going to be of so much difficulty. It's pretty much easy and frictionless, and the person gets it within minutes, so it's instant.
Several factors are combining to promote the growth in the use of cryptocurrency across Africa. During the national lockdown in Nigeria, for instance, Paxful reported a 30% rise in Bitcoin trade in the country. The vast majority of those embracing the trend are young people.
What we're also doing is focusing on education, because perception around cryptocurrency is still something we're trying to improve on. Some people see it as a complex technology. Oh, I don't want to invest. Some people see it as a Ponzi scheme, right? Oh, okay, I'm not, so these people are criminals and all that. And then other people just think, oh, you know what, cryptocurrency, I don't have the money to invest in cryptocurrency.
And as the crypto rush continues, some experts are quick to warn potential investors to watch out for the risk and hedge against it.
It's a very volatile market, extremely volatile market. Within a twinkle of an eye, it can appreciate and gain so much value. And also within a twinkle of an eye, it can depreciate and lose can lose like 100% of the value it gained yesterday. So that is why you don't invest more than what you can afford to lose.
Despite the risk, digital currency experts project a continued rise in the adoption of cryptocurrency across the continent, especially given the weaknesses and instability around local currencies. And after initially kicking against the adoption, governments across the continent are now beginning to embrace it and roll out measures to regulate the trade in cryptocurrency.
Money is evolving, so that's weird. So it's something that we cannot control. The best we can do is be part of this new technology because it's here to stay.
It's an inevitability many are now resigning to, including governments across the world. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
You are watching Global Business Africa. We're going to take a short break now, still coming up on the show. The U.S. economy loses jobs for the first time since April. And Singapore pushes for greener projects to revive its economy.
Business in Africa is at a crossroads. We celebrate those who are adopting and thriving despite the challenges, from grassroots to big businesses. Global Business takes you along for the ride as we track the making of a giant. Only on CGTN.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
I try to not let it affect me, but there are days when it does. I'm a human being, and to see patients in a hospital bed and their family members are not there, there's no one there to hold their hand, that human touch, you know?
I just hope everyone can remember that the situation is not permanent and that everything will get better eventually.
Now, in the U.S., rising coronavirus cases have seen the country lose 140,000 jobs for the first time since April last year. Restaurants and bars led the payroll declines as new restrictions in some places and cold weather sapped enthusiasm for outdoor dining. The figures were the latest sign that the fragile economic recovery from the risk. Now, the U.S. has regained about half of the more than 20 million positions lost at the height of the lockdowns this spring. According to a report released by the Labor Department, nearly 11 million people. The report comes as other data shows consumer spending and confidence has weakened, even as vaccine approvals bring hope that life will start returning to normal soon. And to Japan now, the country has declared a state of emergency for the greater Tokyo area. That's COVID-19 cases. For 2 days in a row now, the capital has seen more than 2,000 new infections a day. The government is considering expanding the measures to other regions. Here's Grace Lee with the latest from Tokyo.
We are in a state of emergency here in Tokyo, but measures are not very thorough. Restaurants are being asked to close by 8 p.m., and the government says the most they can do for those who don't comply is name and shame them. The rest, facilities like theaters, theme parks, and schools will remain open. There is a possibility that this state of emergency will be expanded to other areas such as Osaka and Kyoto. Osaka's governor stating that he is hoping to request this by tomorrow at the latest. So we may see this state of emergency expanding beyond the greater Tokyo region. When speaking about the state of emergency, the Prime Minister did mention that he still hopes that Tokyo can host the Tokyo coming up in just about 6 months. However, since then, the IOC's top member, Dick Pound, has spoken out saying that nothing really is confirmed at this time and that there is a chance that perhaps the Olympics might not go ahead, hinting that perhaps the growing cases in Tokyo may be a hindrance to plans going forward.
Now, Singapore's Prime Minister has reached the country's key goals is to become a low-carbon economy. This will be accomplished through the increased use of solar power, decarbonization, green financing. However, as the pandemic-hit economy faces its worst recession on record, can economic recovery go hand in hand with Singapore's green goals? Here's CGTN's Miro Liu reporting.
Electric car-sharing firm Blue SG had planned to reach 2,000 charging points by the end of last year. But pandemic-related restrictions and a manpower crunch due to cases amongst migrant workers disrupted their plans, raising concerns that Singapore's green goal of phasing out petrol and diesel vehicles by 2040 could potentially go off track.
We ended the year with 1,491 charging points across 375 stations, instead of achieving 2,000 charging points. During the circuit breaker, constructions were not possible at all. We were only able to resume around 40% of our station's constructions.
Similar disruptions were witnessed in the installation of solar panels aimed towards meeting the Republic's goal to quadruple its solar energy production by 2025. However, experts in the area are not concerned. They believe that Singapore will not only meet its clean energy targets, the green sector will also create jobs for those who lost their livelihoods due to the pandemic.
We are limited by manpower, so therefore can we now upskill or new skill people who have lost their jobs, right, to become the new green workers that can help accelerate the deployment of renewable technology and solar in particular.
In fact, in August last year, Singapore's Minister for Sustainability and Environment said that the green sector is expected to create 55,000 new and upgraded jobs in the next decade, with 4,000 in 2021 alone. Furthermore, environmental consultants note that contrary to expectations, the pandemic has served as an opportunity for businesses to reorganize and re-strategize in favor of sustainability and decarbonization.
It's opened up many opportunities to create new business streams around sustainability. We should also very much consider sustainability as a way to cut costs as well. Many sustainability initiatives, for example, saving energy, reducing waste, these are cost-cutting measures.
Experts say that the pandemic has brought about a change of mindset in favor of sustainable solutions within the business community. That, coupled with targeted government policies as well as increased public awareness, should hopefully support Singapore's economic recovery in a greener and more climate-resilient manner. Mirulu, CGTN.
Now, China's mobile game industry saw revenue soar by more than 32% in 2020, with China-developed games surpassing the 100 billion yuan mark for the first time. Developments and advancements in China's gaming tech, as well as the rapidly expanding domestic market, are attracting international gaming companies to work more closely with China. Here's CGTN's Zhang Shixuan with more.
One can easily tell from the stylish drawing that this is a typical Japanese animation, but it's now getting lots of rave reviews from Chinese animation fans. The market is now so promising that Tokyo game developer K-Lab has just announced a partnership with Shanghai's Shengqu Games to develop a mobile game for China based on a television animation series JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The preview showings of its game were a big hit at one of China's biggest anime and comic events, Comic Up 27, held over the weekend. The release time has not yet been decided, but Chinese fans who saw the preview were pretty excited.
I watched it and I really like it. I hope that the game can bring back anime style. I used to play games based on animations, so when I pick a game, I usually choose one featuring the animations I'm familiar with.
Of course, I like JoJo. I started watching anime last year. I finished all the seasons last year. I don't know how to describe it. It's just great, the plot and everything.
The game being planned will be the first to feature JoJo on the mainland.
In 2020, the number of China's game users reached 660 million, generating revenue of more than 278 billion yuan. China is now rapidly growing into the world's largest game market, so we're putting a lot of emphasis on it. We're hoping to develop a game for Chinese fans, so Shengqiu Game is our best choice for a partner here.
Domestic game developers are showing increasing interest in introducing popular works from outside China by working with the foreign firms which make them.
We started working closely with foreign companies quite a while ago, when the company was called Shenda Games. Especially in recent years, Japanese animation and comic IPs have flocked into China. Foreign companies have relatively high standards, especially in the animation industry. So we've been raising our development standards and introducing games with more Chinese characteristics.
Liu says Shengqiu Game plans to import not only cartoon concepts from Japan, but from Europe and the US as well. And a good number of foreign IP holders are now looking at a large game market here in China. Japanese game company Marvelous has just announced a deal with Tencent subsidiary Frame Investment, which should help prepare Tencent into the international gaming market. Zhang Shixuan, ICS for CGTN, Shanghai.
Well, let's take a look at commodity markets now. Oil prices hit and were on track for a strong weekly gain. They were supported by Saudi Arabia's pledge to cut output. Also, a rally in global equities did help. Both Brent crude and WTI were on track for weekly gains of about 6%. However, analysts said oil prices could see a correction in the coming months, and that's if their rallies were not backed by stronger fuel demand. Meanwhile, gold inching lower today as the US dollar and treasury yields did firm up, though hopes for additional stimulus in the world's largest economy kept bullion on a course for a second straight weekly gain. Well, let's take a short break now, still coming up on the show. This 7-year-old proves you're never too young to dream as he invests in his future. And we'll bring you a gift that keeps on giving for parents around the world.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here in Qanater, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Let's go to Uganda now, where a 7-year-old boy with a love of planes and flying has become a sensation in the country. Now, his obsession with aircrafts and becoming a pilot has captured the public's interest. Here's CGTN's Leon Senyange reporting on Grassroots tonight.
This isn't just a game of dressing up for 7-year-old Graham Shema. He really wants to be a pilot. It's a dream that was sparked by an almost tragic incident.
When I was 3 years, I watched a helicopter crashed on my grandmother's roof. So I got interested about piloting.
Shema occupies himself with everything to do with planes, from fixing his toy planes to naming aircraft parts. His mother is eager to see him through every step.
Once you see some talent, once you see your kid loves something, don't force them to do something they don't like. Because if you want to be successful, do something you love.
Shema's love and curiosity in planes has already got him flying. He uses the simulator here to hone his skills.
It's like in real life. When it was changing, this thing was also changing. When I changed this side, it also changed. When I pinched down, also it pinched down. When I pinched up, it pinched up.
Shema may still be years away from flying an actual plane, but he is already learning the basics. His tutor says he is a quick learner. Emmanuel Senaburia has been guiding Shema for over a year now.
He likes what he does. He has an extremely exceptional determination about aviation. And actually, when I saw that in him, I was so impressed that it kept me coming to meet him every other day.
Shema may be too young to get his career into full flight, but his hope is that opportunities will come his way. Uganda's aviation industry is growing, so Shema is already planning out his future. He says he wants to one day fly Uganda's commercial planes. Leon Senyange, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Now, a new type of clothing inspired by the ancient Japanese art of origami could help the fashion industry reduce waste and help mom and dad save money buying their kids' clothes. The company Petit Pli seeks to introduce clothes designed to adjust to the shape of growing children in the hopes of edging out fast fashion. Here's CGTN's Beryl Oro with that story.
London-based startup Petit Pli, which is French for little pleat, designs children's clothes with an innovative pleat system that lets them grow with the child, expanding in multiple directions but also able to contract back to their original size.
Petit Pli exists because the fashion industry is the world's second largest polluter, and we already know what one of the solutions is, and that is to extend the life and use of clothes, and that's the best way we can reach our carbon, water and waste emission targets by 2030.
According to Yasin, children grow 7 clothes sizes during their first 2 years, meaning parents are left with a lot of clothes that have barely been worn before they are too small for the child.
When I first showed my niece the garment that expands, she was around 3 years old, and so the garments in their condensed state looked too small. And then when I opened it for her, she just gasped with excitement, and I think that element of magic truly captured what innovation can be.
With a background as an aeronautical engineer specializing in deployable structures, Yasin's outfits embed a special structure in fabric that was inspired by the ancient Japanese art origami.
This involved a lot of research into origami structures and folds and stowing away as much material as possible into a small gap and then having that deploy out in space. And that has really filtered down into this design.
Petit Pli featured in 2017's Global Grand Show, which showcases students' ideas for social impact to solve the environmental, social and economic issues facing the world.
What if you could have a garment which has temperature properties which are far beyond what our standard cheap clothing can achieve? What if you could have one garment which really truly does keep you dry and cool in summer and also dry and warm in winter, where it's adapting? Or what if you could have a garment which morphs in its shape for different social situations?
One set of Petit Pli clothes currently fits a child for more than 3 years, growing through 7 distinct sizes before being reset back to the smallest size and passed on to the next infant or sibling. The company is now also experimenting with prints to hide daily stains and exploring adult wear and non-children's wear application. Beryl Oro, CGTN.
Well, before we leave you today, here's a quick look at Africa's currency markets. South Africa's rand edging up today against the dollar after plunging 2.5% in the prior session. That is in spite of rising coronavirus cases and concerns over local debt continuing to weigh on sentiment. Now, the currency was set to largely underperform its peers for the week, with a 5.2% loss, which is its worst week since April 2020. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Naira strengthening today at the investors and exporters official window, and that's despite a 38% drop in dollar supply in the country. It hovered at around 393.67 per dollar. At the black market, the exchange rate remained stable at 470 Naira per dollar. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.